for joining the webinar today. We are going to give it another few minutes in order to allow the other participants to join on. So we'll begin in 2 minutes. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining the webinar today. We're here today to discuss a funding opportunity from the Bureau of Justice Assistance for fiscal year 2022. It's part of the Second Chance Act programs, and the solicitation is called Improving Substance Use Disorder Treatment and Recovery Outcomes for Adults in Reentry. Next slide. Our speakers on today's webinar come to us from the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. First, we have Meg Chapman, who's a policy advisor and oversees the Second Chance Act behavioral health portfolio, as well as other Second Chance Act work. And then we also have Jennifer Lewis, who's a state policy advisor in the programs office, and she oversees the supports of grants and budgets management for the Second Chance Act grantees focused on behavioral health and substance use disorders. We also have some folks from the Council of State Governments Justice Center. We have Alexis Lacey, who's a project manager for behavioral health. She oversees the training and technical assistance for this effort. And then I am Sarah Wurzberg. I'm a deputy division director for behavioral health at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. And I oversee our training and technical assistance for Second Chance Act behavioral health housing, as well as our other federal training and technical assistance work. Next slide. So today we're going to give you a little bit of an overview. So we'll talk a little bit about the Bureau of Justice Assistance, the Office of Justice Programs. We're going to talk to you about the fiscal year 2022 Second Chance Act grant programs, and really diving into the work on improving substance use disorder treatment and recovery outcomes. So we'll go into the specifics of what this funding opportunity entails and different things you should consider in responding to the solicitation. Additional information will be provided about how to apply for this grant opportunity and other resources that are available that might support you in development of your application. And then we'll also go over JustGrants, which is where you will be submitting the applications. We're going to leave some time for questions and answers at the end. If you have a question, you can feel free to put it in the chat. We'll hold those till the end. Or as we get towards the end, feel free to ask your questions as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Meg Chapman, who will start with an overview for us. Next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. Great to have you all join. Looking forward to this conversation, as Sarah mentioned, and thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. My name is Meg Chapman, and I am a policy advisor within the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview, and then we'll move into the specifics of the solicitation we're talking about today. So starting with just a refresher on the Bureau of Justice Assistance, we're located, sorry, next time I will say next slide. We're located within the Office of Justice Programs, or OJP. And OJP provides a wide range of services to the criminal justice community in the form of grants, training, technical assistance, and research. Although our focus today is on BJA funding opportunities, there are other OJP offices shown on this slide that offer additional grants and programs to support our shared public safety mission. Next slide, please. And BJA in particular's mission is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support local, state, and tribal strategies to achieve safer communities. Next slide. The Second Chance Act, which was signed into law in 2008 and reauthorized in 2018, supports a suite of second chance grant programs that support state, local, and tribal governments and nonprofits to improve outcomes for youth and adults leaving detention and incarceration who are returning to their communities. Next slide, please. And second chance funds in particular are used to provide site-based awards to pilot or scale up reentry programs, as well as training and technical assistance providers who support grantees in the field at large. The training and technical assistance providers support grantees as they plan and implement their grant programs through direct coaching and general assistance, which might include sharing resources, connecting grantees to peers, hosting webinars on relevant topics, or organizing learning communities. Next slide, please. The National Reentry Resource Center, also called the NRRC, is a collaborative project between BJA and OJJDP to advance the knowledge base of the reentry field. And that means supporting agencies and organizations like yours, criminal justice agencies that are in a position to prepare people for or supervise people in reentry, and community-based organizations who provide services and support to people in reentry, as well as individuals seeking information about where and how to find such support. The NRRC is also serves as convener and coordinator among our Second Chance Act grantees. Next slide, please. I'm going to pass the ball over to Sarah Alexis to talk a little bit more about the Council of State Governments as one of those training and technical assistance providers.
Hi, everyone. The Council of State Governments Justice Center is the training and technical assistance provider for those that are awarded grants under this SCA solicitation. CSG Justice Center is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that combines the power of a membership association serving state officials in all three branches of government with policy and research expertise to develop strategies that increase public safety and strengthen communities. We seek to break the cycle of incarceration, improve health, opportunity, and equity, and expand the knowledge base of what works to improve public safety.
You can go to the next slide. And so I'm back to get into a little more detail on this particular solicitation. And as I mentioned, this solicitation, BJA supports a suite of Second Chance Act programs. And so this is the solicitation we're talking about today is just one of 6 that will be or has been already released as part of the suite of Second Chance Act grant programs. So we'll be focusing on only one of these grant programs today. We encourage you to visit BJA's website to learn more about any others you are interested in. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this grant program, Improving Substance Use Disorder Treatment and Recovery Outcomes for Adults in Reentry, is to establish, expand, and improve treatment and recovery support services for people with substance use disorders during their incarceration and upon reentry into the community. So that's the overall purpose of this grant program. Next slide. The program is available to state, local, and tribal governments, as well as nonprofit organizations. We anticipate making up to 8 awards for approximately $900,000 each. Please note the due dates at the bottom. We will repeat these a few times over the course of this presentation, as they are very important. And please return to the solicitation we'll be doing over the course of this hour. We'll be going over different components of the solicitation, but please, if you're interested in it, in applying, go to BJA's website, download the solicitation and look at it really carefully, as it will have, include and review all components for applying. Next slide, please. So as I said, the goal here is to enhance your organization's ability to address the substance use disorder treatment and recovery support needs of people, including parents with minor children and pregnant postpartum women who are incarcerated and upon reentry, in order to reduce recidivism, promote long-term recovery, and in the process improve public safety and public health outcomes. Our objectives are to improve the provision of evidence-based substance use disorder treatment and recovery services to individuals in prisons and jails and through the reentry process, including the provision of medication-assisted treatment, or MAT. Another objective is to provide prison-based family substance use disorder treatment programs to incarcerated parents of minor children or pregnant and postpartum women. And a third objective is to reduce the use of alcohol and other drugs by people with long-term substance use disorders during the period of incarceration and through the completion of parole or court supervision. Next slide, please. In terms of allowable use of funds, for this program, we encourage applicants to consider using funds to continue and improve substance use disorder treatment programs, including MAT, in prisons or jails, to develop, implement, or expand prison-based family substance use treatment programs for incarcerated parents of minor children or pregnant women, to develop, implement, and expand programs for supervised people who have long-term substance use disorders that include alcohol and drug use assessments and individualized, coordinated, and continuous delivery of substance use disorder treatment and case management services, or to coordinate between appropriate corrections agencies and service providers to ensure a continuation of care after release, and to strengthen rehabilitation efforts by providing addiction recovery support services. So in terms of, most grantees use funds under this grant to support salaries and personnel costs, whether that be for case managers or recovery coaches or peer recovery specialists, treatment providers, facility costs, and other costs like training, travel, medication, costs that are directly related to the operation of the program. The key is that there's a clear nexus between the request and the proposed program. Next slide, please. All applicants must use standardized processes using validated tools to screen all individuals entering a correction facility for substance use disorders and assess those that screen positive for SUDs to inform treatment and recovery case management. So that's one required component. Another is to provide evidence-based pre- and post-release substance use and cognitive behavioral interventions to address criminogenic risk factors. And then the third is to collect and use data to determine the effectiveness of the BJA-funded substance use disorder treatment program. So those are the three essential elements. Applicants for prison-based programs should also integrate techniques to assess the strengths and needs of incarcerated parents, immediate and extended family, to support a treatment plan for the incarcerated parent. Ensure that each participant in the program has access to consistent and uninterrupted care if transferred to a different correctional facility within the state or relevant entity, and be located in an area separate from the general population of the prison. Next slide, please. There are two deliverable requirements for this grant program. One is the development of an action plan within the first 6 months from award, and a final report that is due at the end of the project period. So all grantees, as we've mentioned, are supported by training and technical assistance providers, in this case, Council of State Governments Justice Center, and they all have expertise in evidence-based programming for populations in the criminal justice system with substance use disorders. Grantees have access to that training and technical assistance providers, as well as other resources through the National Reentry Resource Center, as I mentioned earlier. But these TA providers will provide individualized coaching to grantees to support them in planning, implementing, evaluating, and sustaining those grants. So this includes working closely with grantees to draft their action plan, or what we refer to as a planning and implementation, or P&I guide. The P&I guide offers grantees the time and opportunity to dig in and document and plan their program upon award. Examples of some of the sections that are included are information on the implementation team, the target population for the program, your screening and assessment process, case planning, the planned programming and services, and evaluation and sustainability plans. And really an important piece is any identified training and technical assistance needs. So it really helps to lay the foundation for implementation of your program. Next slide, please. So one important note is that the Second Chance Reauthorization Act requires that applicants certify that any treatment program proposed in the applications are clinically appropriate for proposed, sorry, it's popped up on my screen. It's clinically appropriate for proposed recipients, shall appropriately coordinate and consult with a single state agency for substance abuse, are comprehensive and is approved by the state, and is licensed if necessary. So this is a mandatory requirement as part of, or certification as part of the application. There's also a second mandatory requirement where the chief executive, it's an assurance from the chief executive that recidivism data will be collected and reported as part of the program and participation in the award. And there's a third one that's just really specific to non-correctional applicants, and that's a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement with a correctional partner. So just a certification that's in place to support implementation of the program. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that there are two priority areas of consideration. The first is consideration supporting the Department of Justice's commitment to advancing work that promotes civil rights and racial equity. To receive this consideration, the applicant must describe how the proposed projects will address potential inequities and barriers to equal opportunity, and/or the applicant, or at least one proposed subrecipient, identifies as a culturally specific organization. So that's one priority area. And the other is to give priority to applicants that will implement or expand access to medication-assisted treatment. And another relevant note is that addressing these priority areas is just one of many factors that we'll consider in making funding decisions. So receiving priority consideration for one or more priority areas is not a guarantee of an award, but is a factor that will be considered. I'm going to pass it over to Alexis, who's just going to go through a couple of examples of programs that we've supported in the past.
Okay, so there are different types of programs that have been supported in the past. One type has been a reentry partnership between state and local correction agencies with nonprofits providing substance use disorder treatments, pre and post release. Another partnership type is between state and local and community supervision agencies, and partnering with a substance use disorder treatment nonprofit to enhance supports for people in the community who are on community supervision. And that could also have a focus around gender responsive services for women. The other type has been a partnership between pretrial services and substance use disorder treatment with those who are connecting to care during pretrial part of their case. So there are some other options as well that you could consider when putting together a proposal. Also partnering with a nonprofit who may provide services within a halfway house or any other type of correctionally operated housing. Sometimes those are called transitional houses as well. And another option could be a nonprofit partnering with a local or state correctional facility to provide care once people are released as well. And those could be providing linkages to other substance use treatment providers, even if they don't provide all of the treatment services themselves. So these are just some of the options. There are a lot of different ways that these partnerships are set up, but we just want to give you a couple different options of what you could potentially put together. Next slide. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer on the next slide.
Thanks, Alexis. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Again, I'm Jennifer Lewis, State Policy Advisor for the BJA Programs Office. I'm going to continue with presenting additional information. Next slide. To be eligible for the FY22, the OJ discretionary grant funding, all state, local, and university or college law enforcement agencies must be certified by an approved independent credentialing body or have started in the certification process. The certification requirement also applies to proposed subawardees. So there are two mandatory conditions to become certified. First is the agency's use of force policies adhere to all applicable federal, state, and local laws. And two, the agency's use of force policies prohibits chokeholds except in situations where use of deadly force is allowed by law. And we've provided the link here for the requirement. Next slide. Applications will be submitted in a new two-step process, each with its own deadline. So step one, you will need to submit an SF-424 and lobbying disclosure in grants.gov by May 27th. And then step two, you want to submit a full application to include attachments in JustGrants website by June 1st. And please make sure to read carefully through the solicitation documents for further guidance. Next slide. So JustGrants Enhancements offers a streamlined end-to-end process enabling applicants and grantees to move seamlessly through the full grant management life cycle. It also gives applicants and award recipients new ways to manage their own entity information and that of users in the system. And then some other enhancements include the ability to use a web-based budget detailed worksheet, streamlined validation process that helps clear budgets more quickly, and a new entity administrative role in JustGrants, and that's assigned to a user who created the sam.gov account. Next slide. So getting started with the application submission, you want to identify the forms needed to submit an application. You want to complete the web-based budget form, complete an application including certifying the information, and then submit the application. Oh, next slide. Okay, so our website includes archived webinars to show applicants how to use JustGrants to apply for funding, including how to search and find open DOJ funding opportunities, a walkthrough of the application process, starting with submission of the application in JustGrants through submission of an application in, through grants.gov, and then through submitting an application in JustGrants, two systems. So setting up JustGrants user roles needed to submit an application, and how to navigate and use the system, and finding resource materials in the site. And I believe we'll provide that link in the chat box. Next slide. Okay, some of the application must include the following elements: an application form SF424, a project abstract, a program narrative, goals, objectives, deliverables, and timelines, budget information, indirect cost rate agreement if you have one, or if applicable, financial management questionnaire, a memorandum of understanding with the correctional partner, certification on treatment provider, and disclosure forms including lobbying, pending applications, research and evaluation, independence, and executive compensation, as Meg discussed earlier. Each individual program solicitation outlines all the elements in the application in the section called Application and Submission Information. And there's a checklist at the end of the solicitation that we recommend you to use to ensure that you've included all the required items. And please note that there are specific forms for some of these items. Next slide. So when BJA reviews your application, including the peer review process, different weight is given to each section of the narrative and supporting materials. So the requirements for each section are detailed in the solicitation, so please review those carefully. You'll also see how the attachments like timelines and resumes count towards particular sections. And here we give you an example of the selection criteria and percentages. Next slide. Some recommended resources available to applicants, particularly those who are new to the process. BJA created a grant application education webinar series, found on the link here. There are 2 previously recorded webinars designed to assist potential applicants interested in applying for BJA funding opportunities. The first is funding opportunities for your community in 2022 that highlights primary initiatives BJA plans to fund in 2022, along with eligibility requirements and estimated funding amounts for those initiatives. And then the second one is funding process, which provides attendees with information about the registrations that are necessary to apply for funding, how to navigate grants.gov and JustGrants, and what resources are available for applicants. Next slide. So here are some of additional resources you might consider when accessing, while processing your application. We provided the links here to the OJP Funding Resource Center, the DOJ Grants Financial Guide, which is very important, the DOJ Grants Financial Management Training Online, which is a requirement as part of your special conditions, OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, and then the National Institute of Justice Crime Solutions.gov. Next slide. So on this page, you will find important contacts for grants.gov and ncjrs.gov. Again, applicants must register with grants.gov prior to submitting the application in JustGrants. So for technical assistance, you want to contact the JustGrants customer support hotline. And then for any questions about the solicitation, please contact NCJRS Response Center. Next slide. And I'm going to end with this slide, which includes a link to BJA's funding landing page. So I encourage you to take a closer look at the solicitations of interest and to regularly check the site for timeline or content updates. So that pretty much concludes my portion of the presentation. So I will hand it back to Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And we'll go to the next slide, please. So this is actually the place where we have for question and answers. So if you can please put in the chat or in the question and answer any that you might have, that would be really helpful. One question that we had already was, is there going to be a copy available of this? And yes, there will be. So we will, this is recorded, so we'll post it as well as the slide deck, which has some of the links we've been sharing in the chat to the CSG Justice Center website. So we'll be able to share that after this. Okay, we have another question that came in. It says, what role does SAM.gov have in the process? So
Okay,
Jennifer, I'm not sure if you can answer that for us.
Yeah, so SAM.gov is identified, you should have an associated DUNS number, or now it's called UEI number, Unique Entity Identifier. So whoever is listed on the SAMS.gov website as an entity administrator will have access to submitting the user roles in JustGrants.gov. So just make sure that that information is up to date in SAM.gov. If not, then make sure you contact SAM.gov and make sure that your DUNS/UEI number is correct.
Thank you so much. So the next question is it mandatory to have a relationship or MOU with a correctional facility? So I guess those are maybe, to me, two separate questions. So maybe we can start with the first piece is, do you have to have a relationship with a correctional facility in order to apply? So Meg, did you want to answer that?
Sure, and yes. So the answer is yes, and the is that if you're a applicant who's, say, a community-based organization or nonprofit entity, we do require a relationship with a correctional facility, and we would like it to be sort of officially established via an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, or a memorandum of agreement between you and the correctional facility. So that is a requirement for non-correctional applicants, so that we can, it gives us assurance that there is an established relationship when, if the application was to be awarded for cooperation between the correctional agency and the provider organization.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a helpful answer. And I think the requirement had been a letter of support, and it's possible that an MOU could also be developed during the planning phase as well as part of the processes. So it could be that you're working towards something such as a memorandum of understanding. And I see in the chat, they're referring to a veterans organization. So if that meets the eligibility criteria in terms of a 501c3 or a nonprofit entity, then you would certainly be eligible to apply. But there needs to be some type of partnership with one or multiple correctional facilities, or it could be a regional correctional facility, just depends on the setup. One other question. You're welcome. If you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. One other question is, when it comes to partners, how do you know if someone would be a sub-awardee in terms of putting it in your budget as a line item? And Jennifer, I think this one you might be best suited to answer.
So the relationship between the contract versus subrecipients. So, so most of the time, a subrecipient that people describe in their second chance budgets are subawardees, because they have goals and objectives that are used to complete the program. So what we identify, when I say we, I say BJA identifies as a contract, is more so like if you were to purchase computers and they have a maintenance agreement. That's more of a contract versus, say, like an evaluator that you're going to subaward out to complete, the evaluation portion. So, and in order to meet the goals and objectives, you need that evaluator to help develop the evaluation portion. So that's typically what we consider as a subrecipient. So for additional information, we do have links on how to identify subrecipient versus contract on our website, or usually at the budget review process, BJA will review the budget and determine if that particular contract, although your agency might consider it a contract, BJA might consider it a subrecipient. So yeah, it could get a little complex, but we do have some information on the BJA financial guide about that.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. So we have another question about the action plan development and what that looks like. So I think I can actually take first crack at that. And then if other people have anything to add, we can do that. So as the training and technical assistance provider will provide a structured process to develop an action plan. So right now, what that looks like is it's called a planning and implementation guide. If you go to the CSG Justice Center website, you can see examples of previous year's guides, which might give you an idea of the type of information that would be in the action plan. But basically, it walks you through the steps of planning the process, which would lead you towards development of the program. So it talks through things like stakeholder coordination, if you have an advisory group or leaders who are involved in development of your program. It goes through the screening and assessments process to identify people with substance use disorders within the correctional facilities. It talks through what a case management approach that would be collaborative and comprehensive, that would include partnership between the substance use treatment provider as well as the correctional facility, and potentially community supervision, if that's applicable to the program as well. It also goes through if there's evidence-based treatment interventions or recovery support services. So let's say you're having peer specialists and they're doing a specific intervention, that would be information that would be provided. You talk through the target population, how that was identified. It would go a little bit into data collection. So what do you plan to collect for this project? How does that align with your goals in the other sections? And then there's also typically discussion of sustainability. So just beginning to think already about, you have this award, which is an exciting opportunity, but are there options for thinking through, after the several year time period, what you can start thinking about in terms of sustaining the program. So it really is meant to walk you step by step through some of the key questions you would need in planning a program. So it is structured, and then your training and technical assistance provider, which in this case is the Council of State Governments Justice Center, we would work through that planning and implementation or action plan with you. And then it would be sent to Department of Justice, and they would review and approve it. If there are any questions, they would get back to you with those questions. So it's a pretty structured process, but it's all meant to be feasible for the target population and to really dive into the specifics of the program and help you bring some groups of people together in your community to discuss different aspects of the program to make sure that it's meeting the needs of all partners involved, but also the people that you're serving who have a substance use need within the justice system. Anything to add on the action plan piece from any of our other speakers?
No, I was just going to add that it's, it's our benchmark, our opportunity to kind of benchmark and separate planning from implementation, and to, have that sense of where the program is heading. And so it's both for BJA, but also for you, so that you kind of have a roadmap to move forward with, and we know what that roadmap can look like. And for the training and technical assistance provider to be able to assist you in following that plan.
I did want to add that we kind of use action plan and planning and the implementation guide interchangeably. So if you hear us use that, just know that we're referencing the same, guide or plan.
So another question that came in is, can this grant be used to pay for medications and staff time for medication assisted treatment?
I can jump in that, yes, so it can support that type of a request. And again, so in that sense, it's allowable. What we would be looking for is to ensure that there's a nexus to your overall program.
And can the grant cover costs for transportation? I'm gonna direct that towards Jennifer.
Yes.
Thank you. Very, very popular question, particularly in communities that might be rural or frontier or have limitations on public transit. Another question on if there are limitations on what the target population can be. And I can answer this. So I think the only limitation is it would be persons identified with some substance use issue. So you'd work to identify people who have a substance use need to provide treatment and recovery support services.
And then part of what we'd be looking at is that there's a validated screening and assessment process to identify and confirm that population, and then sort of case management approach that combines looking at criminogenic risks and needs. So as you develop your application, those would be things we're looking at.
Thank you. Another question for Jennifer. Can the grant be used to help purchase property or land to support development of a program?
When you say development, do you mean like bricks and mortar type? Like, can you be more specific?
So I think they're referring to maybe like a building, like if they need a place, let's say they need a place in the community for people to go. So like, I think they're referring to and people can, whoever asked the question can correct me, but I think that's what they're referring to.
Just like use of the building, or am I?
It says purchasing property.
I believe that is part of the unallowable costs under the OJP financial guide.
Thank you. And then I think a question springing from that, which would also be for you, Jennifer, is the cost of vehicles allowed under this grant program. So like helping with that transportation question, which I think is kind of two different things.
Yeah, so the purchase of vehicles is unallowable for this program. But if you need to purchase like just for instance, bus tokens or passes, or like, yeah, but the purchase of vehicles is not allowed there.
Thank you so much. That's helpful clarification. And then we have a follow-up question on the property question. I think this might be getting at a different aspect of it, so I'll direct this to Jennifer again. So can you use a rental lease of a building or a unit. So like help to pay for leasing, let's say, a treatment program space.
Yes, that's allowable. And some people use, I believe, indirect costs for that, or direct costs for that. So yes, that is allowable.
And I think now that we're on the allowable costs, it's just free flowing here. So another question on that, can the grant be used to pay for housing costs for people in the program? So if someone's reentering the community, can it support paying for their housing?
Yes.
And oftentimes I'll say there is often a housing focus to these programs to support connections to that, since it's a critical part of reentry. So whether it be partnership with recovery housing or a treatment provider may have housing on site, or permanent supportive housing, that is something that we've seen from programs over the years as well. If there are any more questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or the question and answers. We're happy to answer all your questions. For correctional facilities who might be interested in the application, do they have to know their treatment provider going into the application, or are they able to put it out for a competitive bid as part of this process?
Well, as I mentioned, part of the application is requires a certification for your treatment service provider. So in that sense, you need to know who that provider is to certify that they meet the requirements of the Second Chance Reauthorization Act.
Thank you. So I'm going to give it a couple, 30 more seconds to see if anyone has additional questions so we can make sure we answer all of them. So Eunice, let's go to the next slide, please. So here, and I'll put this in the chat as well, is a link to the solicitation. So you can go back through and read the requirements. We'll also share the recording of the webinar, and just a reminder on some of the due dates. So to grants.gov, the deadline is May 27th, 2022. And then JustGrants deadline is June 1st, 2022. So just want to make sure you're aware and you get your applications in through those. And on the solicitation, you can also reach out through there, and there is a link to an email. If you have additional questions, you can email there to ask any additional questions. We want to thank everyone for participation today. Thank you to Jennifer and Meg from BJA and my colleague Alexis from the Council of State Governments Justice Center. And actually we had another question come in, so I'm going to pause there on the closeout. Apologies about that. So someone is asking regarding personnel, the program allows to have one coordinator only, or can it be a coordinator and some type of additional staff? So I think since that's related to budget, maybe we'll have Jennifer answer that first.
Yes, that's allowable. Unless, like, do you have anything to add?
No, again, I think the important thing is, as you develop your application, to make it clear what the role of different, if you're seeking to support more than one person, to make it clear in the application what their role is and how they'll be supporting the overall project or program.
Thank you. Yeah, so it depends on how you really want to staff the program. So think about how you'd like to staff it, and you can make a budget according to that. And then there is another question on another Second Chance Act solicitation related to pay for success. On Wednesday, is that webinar different? Yes, that webinar is different because the funding opportunity is different. So the focus for that well, they're all reentry focused grants. It's a little bit of a different focus. So it's on development of an outcomes or performance-based contract. It could be to address people with substance use disorders, but it could be a different target population. Could be related to permanent supportive housing, educational service, vocational services. So it is different information that will be shared. So if you're not sure what application you're interested in applying to, I'm sure we would encourage you to attend both and make a decision on what works best for your community.
And to visit BJA's website, because that to actually look at the solicitation might also be helpful to you.
Yes, definitely. And we'll put the current funding opportunities link. There's lots of great opportunities. So I would encourage you to look at all of those. Okay, so now I'm not seeing additional questions. So I will thank Jennifer and Meg from BJA for their participation and Alexis from the Council of State Governments Justice Center. We appreciate you taking the time to attend this, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you all. We encourage you to apply, anybody who's interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.